Imagine that after years of loneliness, of despair, longing to finally find your soulmate to marry, to start a family with, imagine that you finally find what seems to be the perfect partner. She is kind, loving, you have fun together, she is serious about you and even proposes to you. But suddenly, all of that turns dark. You discover that the person you are about to marry has killed someone whose body has never been found. Well, the protagonist of this Netflix documentary called Should I Marry a Murderer doesn't have to imagine it. This is exactly what happened to her, and it's the story that completely changed her life. In this video, we're going to analyze the case of Caroline, who, with complete honesty, shares the difficult psychological and emotional process she went through. From the moment she finds out what her fiancé did until he ends up in jail. A process full of doubts, fears, self-deception, dissonance, idealizations, back and forth, guilt, and dissociation. Caroline's case reminds us of what so many people experience in their relationships. It doesn't have to be something as extreme as a crime. Many people know how hard it is to accept and deal with the fact that the person you love so much treats you badly, isn't good for you, and is dangerous. Maybe our brain can't accept it and clings to that bond, making it so hard for us to leave. I'm Claudia Nicolasa, I'm a psychologist, and keep watching to understand what happens in the mind of someone who not only can't get out, but even ends up defending the person they should fear the most. And how you can finally break free from that bond, like Caroline did, who managed to face reality and report her fiancé. Caroline perfectly shows that toxic relationships don't happen to people because they're weak or foolish. They happen when you get involved with the wrong person at the wrong time and with an unhealed wound, let me tell you. Caroline is an intelligent, successful, independent woman with a good career, a good family, and friends who love and support her. She has been in a relationship for 8 years. Everything suggests she'll achieve her dream of getting married and starting a family. They buy a house together, they have a dog together, but suddenly and almost without explanation, her boyfriend ends the relationship. I don't know if someone has ever disappeared from your life without warning, but psychologically, this can be something serious. It turns your whole psyche upside down. It creates a lot of chaos. Your whole world suddenly falls apart, and you can start doubting yourself, who you are, what to expect from life, what to expect from people. Not to mention that painful sunk cost feeling that you spent years of your life on, quote-unquote, nothing. In addition to the heavy blow to self-esteem and self-confidence, this can cause a deep abandonment wound, an unbearable feeling that some people may try to cover up with too much urgency. How do they do it? Well, often by getting into a relationship in an intense and rushed way.
I felt very lonely, and I wanted to find someone who wouldn't want to change me, someone who wanted to start a life with me, with the idea of getting married and having children.
And that's what Caroline does. Shortly after the breakup, she opens Tinder, matches with a man, and they immediately meet at his estate, which is an hour and a half away from where she lives, quite isolated. And that stranger, in just a few months, becomes her future husband.
It felt rushed, especially since she had just broken up with her previous boyfriend.
I don't know if you've ever had a friend who gets out of a long relationship and suddenly it seems like they've already found the love of their life.
Y le dije, me parece una locura.
Often, behind this is someone trying to escape their pain. In psychology, this is called the window of vulnerability. After a major emotional loss, the attachment system is deregulated, hungry, and forms bonds with a speed and intensity that it wouldn't accept at any other time. That's why you're more likely to make bad decisions, such as partying too much or using substances. In general, you become much more susceptible to disorders and risk. So please, after moments of breakups, losses, or crises, stay calm, keep a cool head, and don't make decisions during that window of vulnerability. Let's continue. This man that Caroline has met is named Sandy. He is a forest ranger, a hunter, and lives on an estate isolated from society with his twin brother. In Caroline's words, a man who radiates masculinity and protection.
It said he was from the Highlands, 6'3", a single contractor looking for someone to keep him warm on cold nights at the farm.
But most importantly, a man who tells Caroline, you are perfect just the way you are.
He made me feel more desired than I had ever felt before.
You see what's happening, right? This happens to so many people. After an experience of abandonment or rejection, our self-esteem can be diminished and we crave a quick dose of validation. And of course, when a new person appears in your life, you might quickly see them as the perfect antidote to that pain.
And it felt strange to me that someone would trust me so much to tell me a secret like that.
In this way, a stranger can become etched in your mind as the place where you'll find that healing, and that, on a dopamine level, is pure addiction. The relationship moves forward at a pace that is objectively alarming. Soon, Caroline leaves her city, her environment, moves to the estate, and gets engaged. She shares this news excitedly with her loved ones, but her circle doesn't respond the way she expects.
Take your time. Don't rush into things, honey.
Instead, they show concern about what is happening.
And I told him, it seems crazy to me.
As advice, when you're in this stage of intense infatuation, listen to those people who have always looked out for your well-being. Because they, not being in that honeymoon phase, can be more objective and see things that maybe you aren't seeing at that moment.
I reacted as if I didn't care about their opinions, and I said, you know what, guys? I understand that you're worried, but I want to live this love story. What's the worst that could happen?
And it's just that this honeymoon, this period of love bombing, sometimes reaches such a high intensity, so quickly, so overwhelming, that it doesn't give you time to evaluate. Your brain gets so much dopamine, so much oxytocin, so much activation of the reward system, that the part that evaluates risk shuts down. Come on, there's no one in control besides the rush, the intensity, and the idealization. Because logically, in a month, in 2 months, you don't know someone well enough to get married. And a very interesting element to analyze is that it's always Caroline who moves into Sandy's world. That can tell us on one hand about the need to escape from your own life, from your own reality. In some way, Sandy and her estate, that environment, can be a form of escape.
It made me feel special, even though deep down I knew it wasn't right.
But on the other hand, this escape can also lay the foundation for emotional dependency. And pay attention, because this could happen to you. When you're always in the other person's territory and the relationship is built around their context, their needs, their ideas, their rules, and so on, this can make you more dependent, more malleable, more easily influenced in that relationship. In fact, this is one of the first mechanisms of control in relationships with unbalanced power dynamics. Isolation from your own support system. This wasn't the only warning sign. Caroline tells us that Sandy was an attentive, caring, kind man.
When he was the good Sandy, so to speak, he would somehow seduce you with his love and his affectionate words.
But as soon as he drank, he changed. He became aggressive, arrogant, and troublesome.
And if he had one more drink, he would change, as if he put on a disguise. He even looked physically like a different person. He sounded different.
We don't need to mention that alcohol, by lowering inhibitions, brings out what people try to hide or repress and control in their daily lives. But a mind so in need of love, of fulfilling that fantasy, of feeling special and lovable again.
I love the fact that someone wanted to marry me, right? I know it's silly and that women today are strong and independent, but I had always dreamed that someday someone would choose me.
She's capable of ignoring however many warning signs it takes just to be able to stay in that illusion.
I was so blinded by love that I couldn't see the signs. Part of me thought that since he came from a tough situation, we could heal each other.
Well, with all this emotional background, I think it's understandable why it was so hard for Caroline to take the step of turning in her fiancé when she found out what he had done. And sometimes, to understand the psychology behind people's behavior, we don't have to focus so much on what's happening at that moment, but rather on the background, on the foundations that created that situation. Possibly, if Caroline hadn't come from such a painful breakup, from that fear of not fulfilling her dream of starting a family, and from that possibly wounded self-esteem, well, maybe she would have reported him that very night. And at no point would she have felt doubtful or guilty about that decision. However, as we will see, that wasn't the case for her. After Caroline found out about the crime committed by the man who was going to be her future husband, she entered what we call a state of dissonance. In other words, two realities collide in her mind. On one hand, all the information and feelings she had been accumulating for weeks. Sandy is a good man. He is the right one. He is the solution to the pain. He is the gateway to happiness. And on the other hand, the new information that doesn't fit with what she had previously stored. He took a man's life, leaving a family without answers that they have been desperately searching for years.
That man had children and was the same age as my father. They were searching for him, issuing multiple alerts as his family desperately looked for him.
And the thing is, the human brain can't hold two pieces of information, two incompatible realities at the same time, without feeling intense tension. And when that unbearable tension appears, it will do anything to reduce it. In Caroline's case, it's this man has killed someone and hidden their body versus this man is a good person and the love of my life. These two things can't be true at the same time in our minds.
My brain couldn't understand or process the fact that the man I had fallen in love with was a murderer.
The brain can't tolerate it, so it chooses. And it almost always chooses the option that hurts us less. So, what does Caroline do? She mentally reinterprets the crime. She creates an alternative reality in her head to be able to cope with this pain.
I was able to face certain things and change beliefs, but in the end I always told myself, it's his parents' fault, or he had a bad childhood, or he didn't mean to do it, or he was drunk, and even if I do this, I can make things better, control them.
But why doesn't she choose to accept what her boyfriend did and leave right away? Because that option means losing much more than just Sandy. It means admitting her judgment was wrong, she was deceived, and invested everything in someone who wasn't who he claimed to be. Something that, at a psychological level, also happened with her previous partner. A painful ending that her mind wants to avoid repeating at all costs.
So I tried to close my eyes and take a deep breath.
You see what's happening, right? She's building a narrative that sympathizes with Sandy, a narrative that serves to override her own judgment, to override reality. This is the typical self-manipulation we do when we want to justify the unjustifiable in the people we love. First, you minimize what they've done. Second, you pathologize your own reaction. And third, you pathologically empathize with the other person's perspective until your own logic disappears. And here's something I want you to remember. Understanding someone's reasons doesn't protect you from the harm they can cause you. Or in other words, a poison doesn't stop being poisonous just because you understand how it was made. Remember this, Caroline goes through different stages on an emotional level. At times, she is sure that this man should be in jail. At other times, she feels guilty for ruining Sandy's life. Sometimes she feels disgust, panic towards him. But then she feels love, and she misses him when he's gone. At one moment, she sees him as someone vulnerable, harmless. And then she herself feels afraid that he will find out she's trying to turn him in. It's a real emotional roller coaster. Because she wasn't just facing a complicated situation on its own, but the police didn't give her all the support and protection that a witness like her needs. The system failed her several times. But in the end, she gathers evidence, reports him, and helps the police. In fact, if it weren't for Caroline, this disappearance and this crime would never have been solved. But let's go back to that psychological difficulty that not only Caroline but many people experience in their relationships. Without a doubt, what makes it hardest to get out of this loop is precisely the fantasy of what that love could become. She, Caroline, doesn't love the darker Sandy, the one who lies and doesn't regret what he did. She loves the Sandy he could become if he accepted his responsibility, if he accepted his guilt and faced the consequences. And this is the simple reason why so many people get stuck in relationships that make them unhappy, because they hold on to what the person could become. And that fantasy, as long as it stays alive, somehow makes it impossible for you to leave. That's why some people can't break that dependence until they've been disappointed multiple times and until the image they have of their partner is completely devalued. So I'm going to share this thought with you that I really like to use. If I told you that your partner is never going to change and will always be exactly as they are now, would you stay with them? The tension, stress, fear, guilt, and frustration are so intense in Caroline that she says she ends up experiencing severe dissociative episodes to the point of losing her memory, abusing substances, and making dangerous decisions. And this can happen when the brain receives an emotional impact that exceeds its mental capacity to process it. In some way, the brain switches off that conscious processing of information in order to survive. And because of this, the people around Caroline no longer recognize her. She had always been a focused, structured, and responsible person. And this shows us how a traumatic bond can take away not only your mental health, but even your identity. A traumatic bond is not love, even though it feels like it is. It's a bond that forms under conditions of extreme stress, vulnerability, emotional inconsistency, and depression. And it usually consists of 3 ingredients: a cycle of love and pain, isolation from your environment and your support system, and of course, emotional dependence. But the most interesting thing in my view about the traumatic bond is the paradox that lies at its core. The person who is destroying you becomes the only person whose approval you need to feel like you're okay. Your emotional survival depends on pleasing the person who is hurting you. And that's why relationships like this look so disorganized from the outside, because they immerse you in a reality that is contradictory in itself. That's why Caroline's story is so impactful. And probably, if you watch the documentary, many of her decisions and actions will shock you. So I'm going to leave you with the question that I think this documentary really raises. How many times have you known something about someone and decided not to know? Because Caroline's ordeal comes precisely from the fact that her mind did what any human does when the emotional cost of seeing the truth is too high. She built an alternative story that is more bearable. Dissonance, denial, all the defense mechanisms are not a failure, they're survival. And I'm sure I'd bet anything that you've experienced it too, even if only on a small scale. Maybe with your partner, your mother, your father, or a friend. I'll say it again. How many times have you known something about someone and decided not to know? I'm looking forward to reading your comments. Tell me if you saw yourself reflected in this story and this process. And thank you to Caroline for showing us this very human psychological process with such frankness and honesty. Bye.